Hello everyone, Bashorp here. In this video, I'll show you how to deal with cougars, what to watch out for, the best way to kill it, and I'll include some information on Cougar 1.0 as well. The new Cougar works quite a bit different from its original implementation. The main difference is that it's a physical animal. But unlike other animals, cougars are not present in the world at the start of the game. Cougars only start spawning after two conditions are met. 1. A certain amount of days has passed. The number of days is dependent on game difficulty and also RNG. However, you're guaranteed to satisfy this condition within 2 or 3 days since the earliest possible day. 2. Once you survived long enough for the cougar to spawn, a special intro cutscene needs to play. The cutscene will only play if you're in a cougar region and only in specific situations, such as loading the game or sleeping while outside, leaving the back section of a cave, or exiting certain buildings in that region. If you're mostly hanging out in non-cougar regions and only quickly pass through cougar regions, it might be possible to delay the cutscene and with it the cougar indefinitely. The cougar cutscene looks different depending on the region you're in, so in total there are 11 different cougar cutscenes. You only get one per run, based on which region you're in when it arrives. You can get the scene in any weather and time of day, which can make it look even more unique. Once the cougar is enabled, the cougars will be present in all cougar regions and never leave, though there's a small chance the cougar won't spawn in its territory when you visit. The cougars are not hard to find if you're looking for one. The tree markings and deer carcasses are some subtle clues to look for. However, you're going to hear the cougar if you're even remotely close to its territory anyway. And if all of that is not clue enough, you can just check your map. For some reason, cougar spots are already marked for you, even if you did no charcoal mapping. Cougar spawns are tied to a threat level mechanic. Threat level is region specific and starts at level 1. If you encounter a cougar and shoot it, the threat level in that region will increase. There's some cooldown to how quickly threat level increases, but if you take too long to kill one cougar, it's possible to go from level 1 all the way to level 3. Each threat level spawns an extra cougar in the region. After 5 days since threat level increase, threat level will decrease by 1 and the cougar territory associated with that threat level will disappear, unless you increase the threat level by shooting another cougar in the meantime, which will increase threat level further and reset the 5-day timer. Note that when you're level 3 threat level, you cannot increase the threat level any further, and so any additional shots at cougars do not reset the 5-day timer. If you're trying to pass through cougar territory without a fight, you have very limited options. Most tools you can use to deal with other wildlife will not work with cougar at all. Light sources are completely ignored, with the exception of a lit campfire, which gives you complete protection as long as you stay close to it, though that won't help you move through the territory very much. Noisemakers don't scare the cougar either, they actually make it investigate the noise instead. If the cougar spots you but is not close enough to you, you can just outwalk it. If you're encumbered, walking into headwind or otherwise slowed down, it might catch up and charge though. Decoys work to distract the cougar to some extent, but not very well. Just like wolves, the cougar will switch its attention to a decoy provided you don't stand close to the decoy. However, it doesn't consume the decoy and walk away, it just checks it out, gets bored with it immediately, and if you're still close, it switches focus to you again. So it's best to drop the decoy and get away fast. Crouching and throwing rocks is quite effective, but keep in mind the cougar can spot you even crouched if it gets even somewhat close, so throw those rocks far away. The last option is to make noise by preemptively shooting guns. This is the costliest option, but it's quite effective. However, it's also a bit risky, as it only works if the Cougar hasn't spotted you yet. If you shoot a gun when the Cougar is stalking you, it will always charge. Much like Timber Rolls, the Cougar has two different attacks. One is the glancing blow, where Cougar deals 20 to 40% condition damage and makes you drop your weapon, and then runs away. There's no damage to clothing, and condition damage is the same on all difficulties, but keep in mind broken bodies still doubles damage taken. The other attack is the struggle attack, which does damage clothing in addition to condition damage. Struggle player damage received scale difficulty settings affects Cougar struggles as well, meaning interloper and misery players take 50% more damage. But unless your condition is low, it doesn't really matter, since the struggle always applies severe lacerations affliction, which caps your max condition at 50% anyway. Severe lacerations still work the same as they did before, causing periodic blood loss and infection risk every 12 hours, so make sure to watch the timer. It's possible to avoid getting lacerations altogether. It's a common misconception that you have to hit the Cougar each time it charges to avoid lacerations, but that's not the case. You actually only need to shoot it once, and you don't even need to hit it. The Cougar only uses its struggle attack in two cases. First, if it reaches you before you manage to shoot it at least once. As long as you shoot it once, it will only use the glancing blow attack forever. The shot doesn't have to hit, as long as you shoot in the direction of the Cougar, it should count. Second, when you attempt to shoot the Cougar more than 3 times, it will switch to the struggle attack on the next charge. If you land the 4th shot when it's charging you and is already close, it should still use the glancing blow attack, but the following charge will result in a struggle. After a struggle, the shots taken counter is reset to 0 again, and the whole cycle repeats. This attack pattern was not working properly on release, as the shots counter used to reset even after glancing blow attacks, meaning you were highly unlikely to get to 4 or more shots before it reached you and attacked, and always started at 0 shots following any Cougar attacks. For this reason, if you're fighting the Cougar head-on, you want to use weapons that deal high damage per shot and try to aim for the head. Level 5 archery and rifle skill increases your damage, and the new bow and arrows from the trader stack multiplicatively with a skill bonus. I don't recommend using the revolver unless you're just trying to defend yourself, shooting one shot to prevent struggles and trying to leave the territory. There's slightly more to this attack counter mechanic though, as not all shots you take actually register. Shots only count if you're close enough to the Cougar. As a rule, if the Cougar is close enough to charge you, the shot will register and increment the shot counter. So another option is to try and snipe the Cougar from far away. It will be harder to hit it, but you can take as many shots as you want, so if you're not hurting for ammunition, it's a valid approach. Note that if a Cougar is aware of you and you shoot it with a rifle or a revolver, it will charge you, but you can take as many bow shots as you want without it charging. Shots that don't travel anywhere near Cougar's direction also don't count, though that's not particularly useful, just something to be mindful of. Lastly, only bow, rifle and revolver shots count. Flare guns and noisemakers do not, so if you take 3 bow or gun shots at the Cougar and it's not dead, you could switch to noisemakers to finish the job. Flare gun crits are tied to bleeding, so just like with the Moose, you can't actually land a crit from a flare gun and it will deal very little damage. I don't recommend using it. But noisemakers can be pretty useful for Cougar fights, and it's probably one of the best uses for them right now. You only need 6 to bring a Cougar down from full health, and since they ignore the damage reduction aura animals get, you only need 6 against aura Cougar as well. In fact, the Aura Cougar is almost exactly the same as the regular Cougar. The only difference is the damage reduction and increased detection range that all Aura wildlife gets. The threat level increase is also triggered only by registered shots, so sniping a cougar from far away or using noisemakers are the only ways to kill one without spawning additional cougars in the region. It is possible to dance the cougar, just like one can dance a moose or a bear. This is risky and high effort, but if you can pull it off, you can consistently kill cougars without taking any damage. Dancing a cougar is slightly harder than dancing a moose, and can only be done when the cougar is using its struggle attack, as its glancing blow attack has a higher attack range and it will be impossible to set up the dance. So you can only start dancing it when the shot counter is 0 or over 3. Once you start dancing it and shooting it, keep in mind this will switch Cougar's attack to glancing blow anyway, and the glancing blow attack has a much higher range, so you can be nearly as close to it as you can to a moose or a bear when dancing. Unlike dancing a moose, you want to dance in a circle, not an oval pattern, otherwise you'll trigger the glancing blow attack. If you don't like the standard head-on approach, you can just simply tank all the cougar damage and lacerations. Since protection now reduces damage from both attacks, it's possible to survive a cougar encounter even in late game misery. In fact, if you get your protection to 100%, you will not take any damage from either attack. This makes Ballistic Vest much more useful now, as it's often your best choice for fighting the cougar early on. And it does more than just half damage from cougar attacks. If you're wearing the Ballistic Vest when you get severe lacerations, the vest will prevent any blood loss you get from lacerations, and not just the initial blood loss, but also the periodic blood loss that triggers every 12 hours, sort of like a compression wrap. However, you cannot take the vest off at any point, or even go through a loading screen for this to work properly, which is likely a bug. If you want to benefit from blood loss protection when you get lacerations, just find a cave or a building that doesn't have a loading screen and spend 3 days in there, sleeping and healing the infection risk. Option number 3 is the stealth approach. This one works sort of like the sniping approach, except you might be able to get closer. Keep in mind that your shot counter will still increase if the cougar is within charging range, even if it can't see you, so if you take a bunch of shots and then it charges, you might not avoid lacerations. Unlike the sniping approach, stealth works a lot better with a rifle than with a bow, since an unaware cougar will get scared each time you shoot. Lastly, if you don't mind cheesing, the safest possible way is to light a campfire or stand in an area where the cougar cannot reach you and shoot it from there. The cougar is a little tricky to hit this way, as it keeps turning around, but you're in no danger as long as you stick to the campfire or the cliff. I wouldn't be surprised if the cheesy strategies got patched in the future though. Fighting a cougar might seem quite difficult at first, but after a few kills it won't feel that different from hunting a moose, only the strategy differs a bit. And the rewards are more than worth it. The cougar head wrap is by far the warmest headgear in the game. For 1 kilo, you get 4 degrees of warmth and 4 degrees of windproofness. It's sort of like a mini bear coat for your head. The head wrap used to only give 3 degrees of warmth and windproofness with Cougar 1.0. For some reason they decided to buff it, even though it was already the best. Well, now it's even best here. Crafting a cougar head wrap only costs 1 cougar hide, and harvesting it gives you the hide back, so technically you never have to kill more than 1 cougar, and you can keep the head wrap forever. The other item you can get from the cougar is the cougar claw knife, which is just as great as the head wrap, if not even better. It is by far the best weapon for struggles, dealing the same damage as the hatchet, but increasing the struggle progress bar even faster than the hunting knife. The improvement in struggles is much larger than it might seem, as this knife is the difference between dying and surviving the occasional unlucky wolf struggle on Interloper, with average condition loss from struggles being about 40% lower compared to the improvised knife. It's also slightly faster in harvesting meat, while being the same as hunting knife in all other ways. So especially on Interloper, it's a huge upgrade in pretty much every way. I'd like to cover Cougar 1.0 mechanics briefly as well, since it's still technically playable on Steam by downpatching your version, and I never got a video out back when it was still in game. Cougar 1.0 only arrived in a region if you spent hanging out there for too long. When you reached a certain amount of days survived in a region, you'd receive a warning that the cougar is encroaching with a 5-day countdown. After 5 days, the cougar would be present in the region until killed, or until hanging out in a different region for 10 days. The cougar could only spawn in one region at a time, so you'd always be safe from it if you knew it spawned in some other region already. Upon arrival, you rolled a chance to be attacked every hour. The chance to be attacked was dependent on difficulty, and it was 0% on Pilgrim, meaning even if you could get a cougar to arrive in a region, it would never actually attack. When the roll to attack was successful, the cougar would just spawn on top of you and force you into a struggle, after which you'd only get one shot, and if you managed to land that shot, the cougar was guaranteed to die. The weapon used didn't matter. In fact, it was possible to kill the cougar even with fire-hardened arrows, flare guns or noisemakers by selecting some other weapon for the struggle and switching right after. Landing the shot was not too difficult with a gun, as long as you weren't unlucky and had the cougar hide behind a rock or a hill right away. With a bow, landing a hit was much harder, especially since the cougar movement was quite unpredictable and it didn't always run away in a straight line. There were a couple cheesy ways to trap it, such as using fishing holes or a lit red flare, which completely trapped the cougar right after struggle, leaving it standing still, staring at you, just waiting to be killed. If you failed to kill the cougar, you had 1 hour to escape somewhere safe before the next attack roll. The damage from a cougar attack could not be lowered by protection. On Misery, with broken body, it was impossible to survive a cougar attack, meaning if you wanted to kill a cougar on Misery, you had to do so before day 46. There was a consistent and most likely not intended way to avoid severe lacerations. Simply having a weapon to fight back with somehow skipped applying the lacerations, as long as this was your first struggle with a cougar since passing through a loading screen. If you wanted another lacerations-free struggle after that, you just had to pass through a loading screen again and then have another shot at the cougar. This was almost definitely not intended and no longer works with Cougar 2.0. The cougar could not spawn anywhere on the map. It could only spawn in specific spots, sort of like fishing holes can only be placed in certain spots. Some regions didn't have any possible areas for it to spawn, so even if it was encroaching in, say, ravine, you'd never actually get attacked, since there was no possible spot for that to happen. In addition to the region-wide mechanic, one could also find a Cougar Den. The den could only spawn in one of 7 regions, and there was always only one at a time, and the active den location would change after some time. The dens were originally intended to be a way to get rid of a cougar for a while if you threw enough noisemakers in. However, in practice, it felt like the best approach was to avoid the dens altogether. When you threw the first noisemaker, you automatically attracted the cougar's attention. And if you thought dealing with a cougar was bad, well, an angry den cougar was much worse. While under normal circumstances, a cougar would only roll a modest chance to attack every hour, the den cougar was almost guaranteed to attack you every 5 minutes in a terrain likely advantageous to the cougar, not the player, as most dens were not in flat, open areas. So if you didn't kill it on your first attempt, you'd get mauled again after just 5 minutes, which is not enough to run away even to the nearest shelter. And if that doesn't sound bad enough, then cougars also didn't deactivate other animal spawns. So if there was, say, a moose or timber wolves nearby, they could attack you at the same time as the cougar. Interestingly, then cougar's struggle was the only possible situation to see the cougar go after other animals. Cougars would hunt not just deer or rabbits, but also wolves, timber wolves, and even moose. They only ignored bears. That covers pretty much everything you need to know about both Cougar 1.0 and 2.0. Thank you for watching.